Hello, this is Jim Dickey. Welcome to another one of our online briefings where we're going to take a look at laying a foundation for optimizing sales transformation success. Now, there are a lot of companies out there today trying to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of their sales organizations, but many times they generate subpar results. So let's take a look at some best practices on how to make sure that you can optimize the performance of your sales teams this year and going forward. Now, the concept of transformation really was probably started by Michael Hammer. He wrote a book called Reengineering the Corporation in the late 90s. We had an opportunity to work with Michael on a couple of different projects. And one of the things he pointed out when he took a look at all the companies that were implementing reengineering back at that point in time, he noted that only 30% of them achieved their full level of success. 70% of the projects delivered subpar results or ultimately failed. Well, fast forward to today, where we've moved on from reengineering to transformation, the result is still about the same. When we've gone out and taken a look at companies, it's less than a third that are really achieving most or all of their objectives. So as opposed to focusing, though, on the 70% that aren't doing it quite correctly, let's focus on the 30% that are and find out what they're doing. Now, going through our benchmarking library of successful sales transformation initiatives, what we see is they often have a structured approach into how they approach this problem. One of the best things we ever saw was shared with us by Chevron. There was a gentleman named Marty McMahon who was the chief revenue officer back then. And the first time I walked into his office, he had this formula on his wall. P times C times V times F greater than R. And I said, I love it. What are you talking about here? And he says, when you take a look at the world of sales, it's a very frail type of environment. We're constantly, it'd be great if we could just come up with a sales approach, implement it, and just repeat it over and over and over again. But there's always changes. And he says, so we're constantly going back in and telling our salespeople to adapt. And he says, what I understand is in order to make them that adaptation possible, is we've got to overcome the R in this formula, which is resistance to change. They're already doing things, they're trying their best, and all of a sudden we're trying to say, no, do something else. And so the PCVF formula is how I make sure that we can overcome that. So let's explore this in a little more depth. Now, the P in Marty's formula stood for pain. He said, let's take a look at what's going on in our organization today and what are the things that are unacceptable, not uncomfortable, not undesirable, fundamentally unacceptable. So what are the pains that you're struggling with? Now, it could be that you're seeing a decrease in your win rate of forecast deals, or you've got a low lead conversion rate, or you're suffering from forecast inaccuracy and the rest of the organization doesn't know how to react to when you say you're going to close business or not. Or you could have high customer churn, could be high voluntary sales force turnover, whatever it is. You need to go through and really understand what is the specific problem we're trying to go after. It's not just enough to say, hey, we need to increase the effectiveness of everybody, or we need to do better, or we need to try harder, or we need to please customers. You really got to get down and understand what's the exact pain point that you want to focus this initiative on. Now, in a lot of cases, after we define what the pain is, we want to start jumping to, hey, let's go find a solution. But the formula suggests that there's something else you should do before that, because the C in the formula is what's causing the pain. You wouldn't go to a doctor and sit there and say, hey, here's my problem, and have him start saying, okay, take these pills, do these exercises, change your diet, whatever, because he hasn't done what? He hasn't done any diagnosing of what's causing that pain. And so we need to do the same thing. So let's go back and say that you decided that your decreasing win rate was the pain that you needed to deal with. Well, what's causing that? It could be that you have a higher competitive loss rates because you don't know what your competitors are doing today. Could be you're seeing an increase in no decisions because you've got poor insights into buyer interest. It could be that you have lack of forecasting standards and people are putting in things into the forecast that really aren't forecastable yet. They're not far enough through the sales cycle. Could be that you have inconsistent coaching. So whatever it is, let's go back through and define what's actually causing that pain to occur. Well, now that you know the pain and the cause, now it's time to start taking a look at what's a vision of what better looks like. And let's put together all the pieces that need to come together to really solve this problem. Now, taking again the issue of decreasing win rates, you may come back and say, in order to deal with that, we need to implement a formalized sales process. We need to implement Challenger or Miller-Heiman, whatever, in order that everybody's doing everything the same way so we can make sure that we're covering all our bases. We may say we need enhanced competitive analysis so that we can go back through and differentiate versus the competition. We may say that we need to develop strategic account plans. We may also say, hey, it's time to use more technology. Let's go implement some of the new technologies in CRM that are help using AI to identify buyer intent, or let's update sales coaching process. So again, you want to list all the things that are going to be down there because there are multiple things that need to be pulled together in order to solve some of these more complex problems. Now, having sat in on a number of these initiatives, once you get to this phase in the project, all of a sudden sticker shock can set in. Everybody starts realizing, my God, this is going to take a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of money. How are we going to pull this off? And while I want you to understand those things, because these things are going to require investment, you need to go through an exercise first, which is figuring out what's the cost of doing nothing. There's a cost associated with maintaining the poor performance of the status quo. So going back to the win rate, let's say that a year ago your win rate used to be 50%. Now it's deteriorated down to 45%. What's that costing your organization? Okay, so let's take a hypothetical situation. You've got a 100-person sales force. The average quota per sales professional is $1 million, and the average deal size is 50 grand. Now, in order to make your plan, each salesperson is going to have to close on average about 20 deals. Now, if I apply my current win rate of 45%, what it says is that each sales professional is going to have somewhere north of 44 forecastable deals in order to close 20. But let's leave that the same, and let's focus on getting back to the old win rate of 50%. Well, what happens? Well, now I close 50% of the 44.4 deals, or a little bit north of 22 deals each. That represents an average revenue increase per salesperson of $110,000. And if I extrapolate that across the 100-person sales force, the total revenue uplift is $11 million. So that's the cost of doing nothing. So take a look at other examples within your company. Maybe it's gone from taking 6 months to get a new salesperson fully productive to 9 months. Maybe margins have gone from 24% down to 22%. Maybe customer churn has increased from 10% to 13%. Whatever it is, average deal size, used to be 50K, now it's down to 47K. So when you go through all those examples, you'll start to realize, hey, there is a cost of maintaining the status quo. And we need to put that in perspective to the cost of fixing the problem and decide which one generates the best ROI. Now, the other thing that happens during the vision state is you start realizing, oh my God, look at all the things that have to happen. And that's what I really loved about Marty's formula, because the F in the formula stood for first steps. You don't have to do this all at once. You can take a phased approach. So what are the first steps we can take towards that vision? It may be that for phase one, you just say, hey, let's just define our forecasting standards and let's formalize our coaching process. Once we do that, we can move on to something else. So again, you don't have to eat the elephant all in one bite. Take some time to do this, but figure out what are the right things to do in the right order. Now, one last thing I'd like to share with you is the whole idea of sales transformation and initiative prioritization, because typically we're not always dealing with just one problem at a time. It may be that the training group's dealing with how do I minimize the time for onboarding new reps. It could be the marketing's working on how do I increase lead conversion rates. It could be that sales people are talking about how do I do a better job of cross-sell, upsell, or introduce a new product. So you might have multiple initiatives that are trying to gain attention at the same time. And so what I suggest you do is to go back through this type of a process. Go pull out everything into a 2x2 grid. Now on the vertical axis, what we're looking at here is what's the impact on sales performance? So if you solve that problem, does it have a low impact on sales performance or a high impact performance? Take a look at that issue first, but then also plot what's your ability to execute on that? Do you really have the resources available today to take on that initiative? Do you have the technology in place already to support what you're trying to do, or do you need to do something else first? And I think when you go through that process and you start to plot these things out, the initiatives that you should be focusing on now become clear because they're in the upper right-hand quadrant. So you may say, hey, initiative E, B, and H, those are the ones we're going to focus on for the next 60, 90, 180 days. And if you'd like to get a little bit deeper dive into that, you can click on this link and go to my article in CRM Magazine where I discuss going through the prioritization process in more depth. So again, I think one of the exciting things about sales is done never is. Whenever we come up with a set of strategies and tactics, we're always going to be modifying them either to take advantage of opportunities in the marketplace or to minimize new threats that pop up all over the place. So we're constantly going to be going through looking at sales transformation and how do we deal with this. So it's a complex issue, but it's a fact of life for us. So if you want to discuss this in more depth, feel free to reach out to us and we'll set you up a time to do a briefing to discuss best practices based on the specific pains and causes that you're experiencing. But we want to work with you to make sure that you do the right things the right way in terms of optimizing the performance of your sales teams. So thank you.